The Hobbit. The Hobbit, the Desolation of Smaug. That is the name of the movie. Hobbits. Dwarves, elves, other races of things that are more questionable. Orcs. Do they exist? Are they all a fragment of Peter Jackson's imagination that he has brought to share with the world? Or are they characters created by J.R.R. Tolkien?
Well, I just think the most basic thing to start up with from the beginning is, what were your expectations going into this, coming off of An Unexpected Journey, and maybe moreover, The Lord of the Rings? Mm-hmm. Like, were you guys disappointed by An Unexpected Journey?
Yes.
I think The Unexpected Journey is a very different tone from The Desolation of Smaug, and that really made sense. Like, in the first half an hour of Desolation of Smaug, and before watching the movie, you don't know what you're expecting, and that's a good thing. But what this movie does is creates further context for where this trilogy is going. But before watching the movie and just seeing The Unexpected Journey, you kind of feel like, I don't know if this is going to be good. There's a lot of CGI.
Like, when we went to see An Unexpected Journey, it was venturing into unknown waters.
Yeah.
And I think there was...
It was unexpected.
It was unexpected. And it was like striking, you know? And I think that there's more of a context now going into Desolation of Smaug. And I think that helped with the enjoyability of it.
Yeah, no, I felt exactly the same way. Because when I went into the movie to watch Desolation, there was really like two ways that I went in thinking about the film, and one of them was with the expectations of making that comparison to the book, and then making that comparison as itself as a standalone film. Like, thinking about it in continuity to the Unexpected Journey, but then also thinking about like Peter Jackson's older work, thinking of the trilogy. And there was those two ways of like looking at it when I went in terms of expectation.
I went into this movie ready to just cringe because,
I don't think The Unexpected Journey got me ready for this movie and gave me any context. I thought he has to fucking turn shit around in this movie, or it's just gonna fucking ruin it even more.
Because you were not happy with that.
No.
I definitely felt the same way, because when I went to go see Unexpected Journey, it started with this sense of like high hopes, and then like really being excited about the idea of like Middle Earth being brought back to cinema, and like really being able to see Tolkien's work again through the idea of film and Peter Jackson's point of view, and definitely seeing Unexpected Journey. It started at this very high note, and then it kind of just like started shooting down through the end of the film, and then ended at a very low note. It started on a low note in terms of my expectations for the Desolation of Smaug, but I think throughout the end, like as the film progressed, definitely by the end, I think it kind of recovered those high hopes of like really having this good film, because I think the film ended on a really great note, actually. The idea between when you go into this film, you either have an expectation that's reflecting on Peter Jackson's work and the past film as a standalone movie, or you can reflect it on the book. And I think that's something I really respect about Peter Jackson's work in the trilogy, and as well as The Hobbit, is that he's not so much using the book as the foreground and as the rock to his film, but he's actually using the lore of the story itself, the lore of Middle-earth, through Tolkien's eyes and through his writings.
I went to go see Unexpected Journey. I had the expectations of after seeing the trilogy, so I was looking forward to seeing that same kind of style, and that kind of tainted my perspective. And I only saw it once, sadly. But seeing Desolation of Smaug, I got to see it as like, oh, this is a different interpretation of like that universe, and like a different way of looking at it and a different way of viewing it, which was really entertaining to see.
The fact that the first one, like The Unexpected Journey, was like so heavily explained through the realm of CGI, created a different feel in comparison to Lord of the Rings. And in the first one, you're unprepared, and before you saw that, the expectation for that was also tainted, and it was just like, I don't know what it's going to be. And then you see it, and it's covered in CGI, and all these characters, the characters themselves are CGI. And so there's so many elements of CGI that it kind of breaks your idea of what it should be, based on the fact that the majority of people who see this movie for the first time have already seen Lord of the Rings, I feel like people who haven't seen Lord of the Rings to see this might be able to see it in their own way, but there's not a very large amount of people who have that experience. Most people who see this movie are fans of Lord of the Rings and go into the movie thinking, like, that's what I want it to be. But in this movie, it gives you a kind of new look on this, even a better look, considering that the first one is kind of comedic and funny and lighthearted, and the Desolation of Smaug is harsh. Like, it's hard, you know? And the way that CGI is used, it shakes you a little bit. It's more powerful. I feel like the Unexpected Journey is a good introduction because it opens you up to this new world and gives you this concept of what that is, what CGI is. But then the Desolation of Smog kind of shatters that again and says, like, oh, it's CGI, but we can still fuck with you and we can still actually make this a component of the story, and it actually will add something instead of taking it away.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't think CGI is like a make or break element in film, especially when we're looking at Lord of the Rings, which is a film that has such a dense amount of material creating these battle scenes and creating these, you know, these elements and characters which revolve around having CGI elements. And I think, like, if we're reflecting on the trilogy and we're thinking about, for example, the Return of the King, I think that especially if we're thinking about the final battle in that
shit
film,
ton of CGI.
it's the whole thing is basically CGI, but Peter Jackson did a great job using the CGI in order to really make that a very, very compelling moment in the film, and he made it very visually pleasing. I think CGI definitely, though, can be a make or break thing on how it's implemented in a film, because, for example, I think in Desolation of Smog or even in An Unexpected Journey, there was a lot of CGI that didn't captivate me as being real or trying to be something real. It felt very poorly executed in a lot of areas.
Yes, I agree with that. And I think there's two reasons for that. One is I think stylistically Peter Jackson was definitely shooting for a more fairy tale look, which in many ways he succeeded in doing. And I think we're starting to see an arc from An Unexpected Journey, literally, of CGI getting more serious and dark and a little bit more realistic. And, you know, that would have been fine. It would have been fine that it was all fairy tale and stuff. But you're right, a lot of it fell flat, a lot of it looked like shit. And, you know, in the Desolation of Smaug, it's the exact same thing. For the most part, it is good in this one, but you can tell that their pre-production time was cut short, and they did not have a lot of time to plan things.
Definitely.
Therefore, a lot of things were shoehorned in, especially since you're making up material as you go for this. It's not like it's in the book, you know, especially in this movie. It hinders the movie at the end of the day.
I think they did a much better job in Desolation of Smog than in An Unexpected Journey. I mean, you could tell when you saw that first movie that it was totally rushed. It was, like, put out to make a deadline, and I just feel like maybe you learned a lesson that, like, you can't just put out anything and people will like it, because it wasn't received close as well as any of the other movies. And I feel like
I don't think he was trying to just put out something. I mean, it was probably like, you know, things didn't work out the way he wanted it to. I don't think he was trying to trick us or anything like that. Like,
I do think it was rushed though, and he was trying to make ends meet.
Yeah,
for
He
a
knew,
deadline.
he knew it was.
yeah.
Yeah, and it was just like, I think they did a much better job of polishing it, and so I don't really compare.
You mean Smaug?
Yeah, I don't really compare this movie to The Unexpected Journey because I feel like they did just such a better job with the special effects. When they did character close-up of orcs, they like switched to makeup, and when it was from behind,
Yes,
they go to
nice.
CGI, and it was just so much better implemented in this movie. It made a fucking world of
that kind
difference.
of makes it feel like not consistent, you know, like it throws you off. It's like, oh, this is like makeup, and you know, it's all done in wardrobe, and then it switches to CGI, and you're like, wait, what the fuck just happened?
And not to mention that the CGI looks worse.
Yeah.
Okay, let's not play any
noticeably.
games here. The CGI orcs look
Yeah.
a hell of a lot worse than the prosthetic ones, and it's so unfortunate that that's the case. Because every time those orcs come on screen, in my opinion, 90% of the time you see them in their CGI form. As soon as you see them in their prosthetic form, you're just immediately taken back to the Lord of the Rings, and you have that same aesthetic, and that's really nice. And I think that's honestly the biggest piece that is missing from this trilogy, as far as matching up to the other, like aesthetically speaking.
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely when we're thinking about CGI and the implementation of how CGI was used in the film, I think something that maybe that we can all respect and all really understand is that The Desolation of Smaug, in comparison to The Unexpected Journey, was much more heavily reliant on the use of CGI in terms of if we're thinking about specific characters and specific elements in the film, whether it be the landscapes or whether it be the characters themselves. I think in terms of The Desolation of Smaug, in comparison to The Unexpected Journey, even though it was much more heavily reliant on using CGI, it implemented it and used it a lot better than the first film.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It was much more important that they did a good job in the second film in terms of using CGI, and I think Peter Jackson accomplished that. I think the people working on the production accomplished that.
The first one, the CGI is kind of flaunted, and you're like, oh, look at this. look how pretty it is, look at CGI, look at this, it's amazing. And the second one, you're just like, oh shit. You know,
it's immersed a little bit.
It's immersed, and it actually plays important roles as far as telling a story. And the first one, you kind of see it as like, oh fuck, it's just pretty, or oh fuck, it's different. And the second one, they use that as a tool to actually go further in depth into the story. The fact that the dragon is entirely CGI, but it works. You know, I don't think we would have accepted that as much had not been for the first film.
Well, and that's the thing, is what I really appreciate about the Hobbit films, regardless of all the technical things regarding CGI and character development, I think one thing that I really appreciate about the Hobbit trilogy versus the Ring trilogy is that the Ring trilogy is very much viewed through a third-person perspective. It really feels like you're kind of floating over everything and watching everything happen in front of you, and that's great. It works out really well, but what's great about the Hobbit is it almost feels like you're watching the film in first person. You're watching it through the eyes of the characters, as if it were happening, and that as if it were happening, kind of like when you see Legolas. It might not be mentioned in the book, but if we're thinking about the lore, those characters probably saw Legolas in the action. Like, they probably never knew his name was Legolas. That's the thing. He was just a character that was a part of the story, but not necessarily exposed in the book. Not necessarily somebody who was a part of the book, because it's like you're watching it through Bilbo's eyes, and that's exactly what you're saying.
To me, it felt like it was more following Thorin's story than Bilbo's story. Like, there was a lot more of his reactions to the environment and to the situation than Bilbo's reaction. You know, Bilbo would usually just kind of be like, what's going on?
And that's the thing that I really loved about Desolation of Smaug, is that it really puts into perspective that there are these different things and different worlds going on in each character's eyes. For example, Gandalf going and seeing Sauron, and that's not mentioned in the book, but it's exposing an environment through the first person character, depending on their environment, depending on where they are. It could either be Bilbo or Thorin or Gandalf, or even Bard. It's all these people.
It's awesome. I love it. Yeah.
It gives you the perspective of all the other characters. It gives you the elves' perspective. It gives you the orcs' perspective. It gives you Gandalf's perspective. It gives you Bilbo's perspective. It gives you Thorin's perspective. And that being said, it creates great context for the last movie, which is ultimately the war between the different races, you know? And that builds up so much tension, and when you see that reflected yet again in Lord of the Rings, it creates this great idea of where they stand in Middle-earth, of what these races all mean. And I think that's really important to create that, especially building up to Lord of the Rings. But it's not just Bilbo's perspective, and for that, it's great, even though it's not the book.
Like, there's a lot of different dynamics and, like, you know, betrayal at the end. So it's just interesting that, like, it kind of fits the whole dynamic of the movie. Is the storytelling fits the character development.
And that's just something I wanted to say that I really respect about Peter Jackson's work, is he's so good at being able to talk about and to show these different worlds and these kind of different universes that are occurring through the consciousness of different characters. I think that's something that I love about Peter Jackson's work. And even in the Ring trilogy, he was able to do that so well.
Yeah, I think it's because he's not scared of making long movies, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Overall, it's just building up to something that's great. And I think that's the beautiful aspect of this. As much as we can not like The Hobbit, or we won't like The Hobbit, in comparison to Lord of the Rings, it creates a world in which Lord of the Rings exists, and for that we have to be grateful.
Yeah, it creates that foundation. Hey guys, first of all, I just wanted to say thank you and welcome to all the new subscribers. So it was really important to us that we would deliver on the notion of having a spoiler review. So me and a few Silver Screen Amigos got together last night after seeing the movie and did a 3-hour review. I mean, obviously, you know, we joked around and stuff, and it's not all going to be in there. And because of this, it's taken me quite a long time to edit. So I'm going to be doing it in segments. And hopefully once I have all the segments together, you guys will just be able to pick and choose the things that you want to hear us talk about. And then if you want to hear our scores, then that'll just be the last video where I'll post, say, final thoughts and scores. That'll probably be a video in and of itself. So yeah, just look out for that. I hope that you guys enjoy hearing our thoughts just as much as we enjoyed expressing them.